It's 1955, and for the first time in history, you're planning a drive across Antarctica. What vehicle do you choose? That could work. This is a Tucker Snowcat, and it's here in the Science Museum collection because it took part in the first ever overland crossing of Antarctica in the 1950s. It was part of the Commonwealth Trans-Antarctic Expedition, the brainchild of geologist and explorer Dr. Vivian Fuchs. Fuchs wanted to do scientific research in the Antarctic to find out more about solar activity, magnetism, the weather, and particularly seismology.
What lies under the ice cap? Are there plateaux or mountains? Perhaps there are several land masses. These and other questions could only be answered by travelling across the continent on the ground.
If he made the crossing, Fuchs and his team would become the third ever to reach the South Pole overland and the first to cross the continent all the way from one side to the other. The only other person who'd tried a crossing attempt was Ernest Shackleton in 1915. Shackleton had planned to take the shortest possible route from the Weddell Sea on the South American side via the geographic South Pole to the Ross Sea on the New Zealand side, but his ship Endurance was trapped by ice and sank before he could make it onto the mainland. 46 years later, Fuchs hoped to travel the same route, and this was the plan. After setting up bases at Shackleton, South Ice and Scott, Fuchs and the main crossing party would set out from the South American side and drive the nearly 1,500 kilometres to the South Pole, where the Americans had established a base by air. Meanwhile, a second team would set out from the New Zealand side and head towards the pole from the opposite direction. The secondary team was led by none other than Edmund Hillary, who just 4 years earlier had summited Everest for the first time alongside Tenzing Norgay. His job would be to leave fuel and supplies up to 1,100 kilometres inland and mark a safe route for Fuchs and his team to follow. Once Fuchs had passed the pole, he would pick up the supplies and travel the last 2,000 kilometres over the now known route all the way to the finish line at Scott Base. The main challenge with the plan is that there's only a short window every year when it's warm enough to do a crossing like this. The temperatures in the interior of Antarctica don't stay high enough for very long, and if the weather turned before the crossing party had made it across, they could be stranded. Fuchs set himself a target of doing the 3,500 kilometre journey in about 3 months, which is at least 32 kilometres per day. In order to hit that target, the expedition vehicles would need to be reliable, lightweight, easily repaired, and operate well at sub-zero temperatures. Enter the Tucker Snowcat. So this is a Tucker Snowcat Type 743. It was made in Oregon in the United States in 1955. It's called Snowcat because it's a combination of snow, where it's designed to travel, and cat because of the caterpillar-style tracks that it runs on. These vehicles are actually designed for traversing soft snow, especially for doing maintenance on things like telephone poles. So the body is quite light. It's got an aircraft construction, so overall it's about 3 tons. And the 4 pontoons have a lot of surface area, which means this weight is spread quite evenly over the snow, which reduces the chances of the vehicle sinking in and getting stuck. Tracks are more effective than wheels, especially in slippery and snowy terrain. They can get much better grip. They have a greater surface area along the floor at any given time to really kind of get as much friction as possible and pull the vehicle along. The 4 tracks are all driven independently, which gives them a lot of traction. Steering also worked in pairs, so the front pairs and the back pair were steered, and that made for much better handling, especially on soft snow where it's hard to get purchase. Each pontoon could actually swivel about the axle independently as well. That made it a lot better for going over bumpy terrain in the states where it was designed for, but also help it with climbing out of crevasses. If it were just a standard fixed track, it could quite easily get stuck, but having 4 moving separately is a little bit more like legs, and it can almost kind of climb over the terrain a bit better. Fuchs and the crossing party set off on the 24th of November 1957. On the second day, just 50 kilometres from the start line, the lead snowcat, with Fuchs at the wheel, collapsed the snow bridge over this huge crevasse, leaving the vehicle and its occupants precariously wedged above the 20-metre drop. Crevasses are giant cracks in the ice caused by movement in a glacier or ice sheet. They can be up to 45 metres deep and may be covered in a thick layer of snow, which can make them invisible. They were a huge headache for the expedition, especially near the coasts where the temperatures were warmer. The stricken snowcat had to be recovered by the other vehicles in the party, carefully coordinating their movements to gradually rescue it over the course of 5 hours. Navigating the crevasses meant travelling at a snail's pace, and over the course of their journey to the intermediary base at South Ice, they had to undertake 2 more recovery operations.
"24 precious hours lost, but she's still with us."
Repairs were necessary to tow points, steering platforms, pontoons and tracks. Spare parts not carried with the expedition were delivered by air and fitted right there on the ice by engineers David Pratt and Roy Hommard. But even so, the constant delays were starting to put the prospect of reaching Scott Base before winter in jeopardy.
Fuchs's plan was based on making the 2,000-mile crossing in 100 days. But each time one of the vehicles fell in a crevasse, it lost us another day. At this rate of progress, we wouldn't reach the pole, let alone the other side, before winter would close in on us, and we would be stranded. No, things weren't looking too good on our side.
Eventually, on the 21st of December, the expedition arrived at South Ice, an intermediary base that had been established by air the previous summer. They'd travelled just 560 kilometres in 29 days, an average of just 19 kilometres per day, well below Fuchs's target, and so would now need to push hard to make it in the weather window. So, we can have a look at the engine. It's in here. So this is the V8 Chrysler engine, it's 200 horsepower. Mainly the modifications that they made here were so that the engine could work smoothly in the very cold temperatures. It was rarely getting above, I think, minus 30. It was very often at minus 40. The engine coolant actually had to be heated up, kind of paradoxically. Otherwise, the fluid just froze and it just became a gel and it wouldn't circulate. So they had a heater to heat up the coolant so it could then cool down the engine. They also replaced the hydraulic valves on the engine with mechanical valves, kind of for the same reason. The hydraulic fluid would congeal and it wouldn't be able to do its job. And they upgraded the lubricants as well to ones that would perform at low temperatures. A lot of the hardware on this vehicle is also used in trucks. So they would use engines similar to this. A lot of the instrumentation in the dashboard were just standard Dodge truck parts, and they apparently weren't very accurate or reliable, especially in the Antarctic. And if you come around to the side of the engine bay here, some of you might have noticed that we have these air intakes on either side, and on this one they are actually on backwards. So I think that's because it was almost scrapped. It was taken apart and then reassembled, and these should be just rotated through 180 degrees. You can see as well it is showing its age a little bit. It's in quite good condition for how old it is and how far it's travelled, but there are some signs of corrosion and the sort of wear and tear you'd expect from an Antarctic expedition. On Christmas Day 1957, behind schedule but having had some time to address mechanical issues caused by the journey to South Ice, the expedition set out for the pole. They were now 1,200 metres above sea level, but if they were hoping for an easier journey in the colder temperatures, it wasn't to come. Ice formations on the surface made the going very tough. These ice formations are called sastrugi and are formed by the wind in a similar way to how sand dunes form in the desert. They can range from a few centimetres to 1.5 metres high and covered the majority of the surface from South Ice to the pole. The expedition had a very hard ride, and the constant stress on the caterpillar units and tow points of the snowcats caused damage which required ongoing repair. Even in sub-zero temperatures, the snowcats had issues with overheating as they towed 6-ton payloads in low gear. so it would have been quite noisy and cold inside the cab. They did add extra insulation. They improved the fit of the doors to make sure snow and wind couldn't get in. And there was a heater under the dashboard that would give some amount of heat to the driver, but on the whole it would have been pretty hard going. The vehicles themselves can fit up to 15 people in. There's a separate back section and there's a separate cab, but they found that really the dashboard heater wasn't sufficient to heat the full area, so they cordoned off the cab so that the driver could keep quite warm in the front, and they used the back to, in this one, bring their seismological equipment with them for their scientific research. The vehicles stopped to be serviced every 320 kilometres, which took an entire day. They also took scientific measurements every 30 to 60 kilometres. But even with those constraints, the party pushed hard onto the pole, arriving there on the 19th of January 1958, where they were met by the world's press.
Dr. Vivian Fuchs' convoy, battling nearly 1,000 miles across forbidding plains and huge mountains, has reached the South Pole, a place where few creatures would choose to live.
It was there that Fuchs learned that Edmund Hillary, having laid depots along the route to the Ross Sea, had taken the opportunity created by Fuchs' delays to press on to the pole, becoming the third party to reach the pole overland and the first since Robert Falcon Scott 40 years earlier. Fuchs had travelled 1,500 kilometres in 56 days, an average of just 26 kilometres per day. He was 3 weeks behind schedule and still had 2,000 kilometres to go. In an earlier exchange with Hillary, Fuchs had been asked about the prospect of breaking the journey at the pole and returning to finish it the following year. He replied,
"Appreciate your concern, but there can be no question of abandoning journey at this stage."
And so the expedition carried on, hoping to complete the remaining kilometres to Scott Base before winter. Exactly 2 months after starting the journey, the expedition left the geographic South Pole. For the first time, the party was heading north for Scott Base, 2,000 kilometres away. At an altitude of now well over 2,800 metres, the air was less oxygen-rich, which meant that fuel consumption had risen significantly and the snowcats were running at less than 1 mile per gallon. Their power was also reduced to half of the 200 horsepower they produced at sea level. Then, on the 27th of January, the expedition suffered a medical emergency. Geophysicist Geoffrey Pratt, who had been travelling in Snowcat C, nicknamed Haywire, suffered a case of carbon monoxide poisoning from exhaust fumes that had been leaking into the cab. His condition serious, the US Navy dropped oxygen canisters so that Pratt could be treated, and he recovered over the following days. With a known route and Hillary's guidance, the pace picked up dramatically. They were now covering 80 to 100 kilometres per day. They made it to Depot 480 on the 17th of February, reached the top of the Skelton Glacier on the 24th, passing through mountainous landscape dominated by Mount Huggins, and down to Scott Base, where the expedition arrived on the 2nd of March 1958. It proved to be an epic journey, and its geophysical observations revealed a single Antarctic landmass all the way across the continent. The success of the expedition contributed to an ongoing groundswell of interest in Antarctic research. Today, Antarctica has more than 50 seasonal and permanent stations, with over 4,000 scientists conducting research in the summer months, helping us understand more about the poles, our planet, and its changing climate. So that's the Tucker Snowcat. I think it's a very cool vehicle in its own right, but having been part of the first expedition to cross the Antarctic and one of the first motorised vehicles to reach the South Pole, it's a hugely significant object in our collection. And it's hard to just walk straight past it here at the NCC because it's just so eye-catching. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please do like and subscribe to the Science Museum YouTube channel.